Joseph K., an ordinary citizen, wakes up one morning and finds himself arrested. He doesn't know why. He hasn't done anything wrong. No one tells him the crime or the law he has broken. He goes to the court, to the lawyers, to the people who should know, but nobody does. As if everyone conspired against him, they all point to each other, but nobody points to the point of his arrest. And at the same time, everyone seems certain that there must be a reason. That's the world of Franz Kafka's The Trial, or as it was originally titled in German, The Process. A story that moves forward and yet goes nowhere, a process that never ends, a case that never concludes. We usually think of a process as a straight line. It has to have a beginning and an end where we move from point A to point B. But the word process itself hides a major paradox. You could even say it hides something quintessentially Kafkaesque. The Latin word process literally means to step forward and back at the same time. Pro and cede, forward and backward. A process, any process, is a loop disguised as a line, a circle that goes nowhere. Kafka understood that better than anyone. He turned the word process into a mirror, a reflection of the endless search for meaning. Kafka's novel is usually seen as a story of law or bureaucracy, but it's much more than that. It's a story about language itself and the source of its meaning and where it comes from. Because what if the very thing we use to find meaning in every conversation, the words themselves, are caught in the same strange process that leads us nowhere? Usually we use words to talk about everything except words. No one talks about words. We talk with words. In this way, the process of communication is seen as a straight line that moves towards understanding other than the words that were used in the process. Words are the invisible means by which we reach every other thing or concept. But what if this process is Kafkaesque? What if we turn it into a circle and start talking about words themselves? Then we end up in Kafka's process, which has no end and no beginning.
What's this?
What's what?
A circular line with 4 holes.
Circular.
No, it's not really circular. It's more ovular.
Don't write that down.
Ovular.
For goodness sake.
Why not?
Ovular.
We can't now write it down just because you say we shouldn't.
Ovular isn't even a word.
You deny that there's an ovular shape concealed under this rug?
He denies everything.
But what happens when we turn them on themselves? When we try to speak about speaking, to find meaning in the most important word in language, the very word that defines language as a whole, which is the word itself.
You did use the word threatening.
No, that was your word.
What does it actually mean? Or rather, what does it do? We know what other things do. We know that the wind blows, the fire burns, an echo echoes. But what does the word do? Does it word? And if so, what does it mean that the word words? Sure, we can imagine the wind blowing or the echo echoing, but we can't quite conceive what it means to word. Why not? It turns out we understand what all other words mean except this one, which is strange because it's the word that makes all the other possible, doesn't it? But you might as well say, so what? We can still communicate and share thoughts and ideas without needing to know what the word necessarily means. But understanding what the word does is understanding what meaning is.
Yes, ovular.
What's that?
Ovular.
There's no such word.
When we say the word words, it doesn't mean much. But when we drop the repetition and say the word means, suddenly it does. If the wind blows and an echo echoes, then the word simply means. That's the only thing it does. That's its only function, to mean. But somehow that doesn't satisfy us, does it? We want a conclusion, a destination. We want to know exactly what the word should mean, just as Joseph K. wanted to know the one single reason for his arrest. And yet the word refuses to end anywhere, or even to begin. It doesn't seem to mean anything. It simply means. It is the channel by which meaning travels, the medium through which all the other words move and mean what they mean. It doesn't mean this or that thing, it just means. Nothing specific, nothing particular. Because if it meant something, anything, it would just mean that other thing, that is, another word. Very strange.
But this foolish babbling, it's not going to make much of an impression, I can tell you that, Mr. K.
This strange word leaves us in a kind of loophole where meaning exists and yet means nothing in particular. It is pure meaning without any label attached to it. But there is a way to understand this strange loophole, by embracing what Douglas Hofstadter called a strange loop. Hofstadter describes a peculiar idea, a loop where meaning exists but cannot be defined as this or that. It has no beginning and no end. Meaning has no conclusion as long as it continues to mean. That's what a loop is, a closed self-referential circle and a loophole in our understanding of what the word word means. If the word meant anything, then it would mean nothing else but this strange loop with no beginning and no end. In his book, Hofstadter explores Kurt Gödel's famous incompleteness theorem, a discovery that broke the back of mathematical certainty. Gödel proved that no system can ever fully explain itself. Every attempt to define everything from within collapses on itself. Something always escapes, the meaning of that very system. If meaning meant something, if it stopped and defined itself, it would no longer be the means. It would become an end, complete, but lifeless. Joseph K's arrest is itself a stop, a sudden interruption whose cause never comes. He spends the rest of the story trying to locate the reason to reach the point where the stop could finally conclude. But the more he seeks the meaning of his arrest, the more the meaning withdraws. His trial, like Gödel's theorem, never closes. It only shows that there is no point of searching for a start and an end of a circle. In language, all the other words are ends, but only the word word is the means. All the other words point elsewhere, and only this one points to itself. This strange idea was anticipated by the philosopher and mathematician Bertrand Russell, who in his Principia Mathematica tried to build a perfectly logical mathematical language, one that could describe everything without ever turning back on itself. Russell wanted a system where the word word could never refer to itself, only to the levels below it. But Gödel, as Hofstadter explains, proved that such purity was impossible. Any language rich enough to describe reality would eventually have to describe itself. Here's how Hofstadter puts it. In Principia Mathematica, there was to be no twisting back of sets on themselves, no turning back of language upon itself. If some formal language had a word like word, that word could not refer to itself, but only to entities below it. When I read about this theory of types, it struck me as a pathological retreat from common sense and from the fascination of loops. What on earth could be wrong with the word word being a member of the category word? The word word is the very heart of the strange loop, the kind Russell wanted to avoid until Gödel made it unavoidable again. But this loop goes beyond mathematics. We can find it in philosophy, literature, and even the divine.
Who are you?
When Moses asks God for his name, the burning bush replies, "I am what I am," a phrase that refers only to itself. The ultimate strange loop, pure being, without being anything in particular. No conclusion, no destination, no beginning and no end. A loop so strange that it was the epitome of the idea of the divine itself. All loops are strange because they are loopholes, gaps in our understanding. And understanding usually wants a conclusion, doesn't it? A solid thing to hold on to. But meaning, like being, resists that. Meaning can only do one thing. It can mean. Being can only do one thing. It can be. These are strange loops, and the only way to understand them is to fall into them completely, without trying to define them and to explain their linearity and rationality. Perhaps no one dedicated himself as much to capture the feeling of looping through logic better than Kafka. His very name became a synonym for the absurd, the Kafkaesque. He systematized confusion. He turned bureaucracy into a philosophy by plunging his protagonist into a process behind a mere arrest. And that word process turned out to be prophetic. All our computers and our phones run on these things called processors. They move endlessly between 1 and 0, the numbers that don't point to anything outside themselves, just like the citizens of the trial. That's Kafka. That's the process. That's our computerized world today, a world of closed, strange loops. The trial is a thorough description of a strange loop, the same loop Gödel discovered in mathematics and the same one Moses heard in the burning bush that happens to never burn out. A bush that has no arrest, no conclusion, whose only meaning is being itself. And we know that being has another name, what we call consciousness. The only thing we're sure we have, and yet the thing we understand the least. The word itself comes from Latin con, meaning together, and scio, meaning to know. To be conscious is literally to know together. But what exactly are we knowing together? Everyone agrees that we're conscious, just as everyone in Kafka's world agrees that Joseph K. must be guilty of something. They all know it, but without ever revealing what it is. That's why philosophers call it the hard problem of consciousness. We know that experience exists, but we can't point to the process of that experience. Consciousness is another version of the same strange loop. We know that it is, but we don't know what it is. And maybe that shouldn't surprise us, because language works the same way. The moment we try to name what the meaning of the word is, we end up explaining something else but the word. We become like the citizens around Joseph, pointing to everything else but never to the reason behind the arrest, pointing to other words but never to the meaning behind them. Because meaning doesn't mean something, not even nothing. It simply means. It's a half answer, to be sure, but the best answer we can give to this loophole. In philosophy, this strange loop has a name. It's called the Hermeneutic Circle, where a word or phrase is always understood in relation to the whole text and the whole in relation to its parts, back and forth endlessly. The name comes from the Greek deity Hermes, the messenger of the gods. And perhaps that's what that word truly is, merely a messenger, but without its own message. It carries meaning from one mind to another, looping endlessly through us. But in itself, it has no specific message. Meaning never stops, because if it did, all the other words would stop with it. It can only turn back on itself, taking all the other words with it, in a strange but still meaningful loop.